So grade 10s, we're going to start off today in the physics unit by talking about what is motion, mechanics, kinematics, and scalars versus vectors. So, what is motion? The movement of an object or any of its parts from one place to another. That is what motion is. Mechanics is a study of the motion of objects and the forces that affect their motion. It can be broken down into two categories. So our first category here is kinematics, the description of the motion of the object without considering the cause of the motion. So if I was to do a kinematic part of mechanics to describe a ball rolling down a hill, I would say the ball rolled down the hill and then came to a stop at the bottom. If we're looking at the dynamics branch of mechanics, it's an examination of the causes of the motion and an explanation of why the objects move as they do. So an example of a dynamics explanation would be a force of 3 newtons was applied to the ball and it rolled down the hill. The ball then hit a wall, which applied a force of 10 newtons opposing the ball, and it came to a stop. So we're mostly going to focus on kinematics, and then we'll move towards dynamics a little bit more towards the end. Okay? So let's look a little bit more at what kinematics is. Kinematics is the science of describing the motion of objects using words, diagrams, numbers, graphs, and equations. Our end goal is to be able to accurately describe or display the movement of real-world objects. So if you're thinking at home like, oh, I'm never going to use physics, this is actually something that you would use all the time. This is something that you kind of already talk about. So if you talk about how fast something's going, you talk about the speed, you talk about how an object moves, that's using these kind of kinematic or dynamic, as we talked about kinematic or dynamic mechanics principles. So you're actually using physics all the time. This is just to help you have a better understanding of what you're saying when you're describing those things to different people. So today we're going to start off with the very, very basics of kinematics. We need to understand the terms scalar versus vector. So a scalar is a quantity that is fully described with a magnitude alone. Now this word magnitude is somewhat confusing. I always find that it doesn't really, I'm like, what's a magnitude? It's just talking about some way of describing what the object is you're talking about. So like meters would be a magnitude, degrees would be a magnitude, different things like that. So it's just a word, the unit kind of measure that would go along with that object. So for example, 1 here, we have 15 meters. In the case, meters is our magnitude. So again, the word magnitude is talking about this kind of unit to describe this object's potentially traveling 15 meters. So example 2, 25 degrees Celsius. In this case, degrees Celsius is our magnitude. So these would both be scalar quantities because they were fully described with a magnitude alone. So we just said 15 meters, that was good. And we just said 25 degrees Celsius. Those are both scalar, we just described them that way, okay? In comparison to that, we have a vector, which is quantities which are fully described by both a magnitude, so again, that unit, and a direction. So this is really important. Anytime you're talking about a vector, you're also talking about a direction. So that's how you know the difference between a vector and a scalar. Scalar, you have magnitude alone. That's supposed to say not along. See, I'll make a change there for you. Described with a magnitude alone. And then vectors are described with magnitude and a direction. So if we're looking at our 15 meters, in scalar, it's just 15 meters. If it's a vector, it would be 15 meters north. So in this case, meters is our magnitude and north is our direction. If you were going 100 kilometers per hour up, in case you are a rocket ship, in this case, kilometers per hour is our magnitude and up is our direction. So I'm going to get you to complete the scalars versus vectors assignment. I don't need you to hand this in. We're going to go over it. I'll post the answer key, kind of a brief video tomorrow, just describing and making sure that you understand the difference between scalars and vectors.